Previously on agentpalmer.com, Crichton's Prey highlights man's folly in the face of technology. The first season of Welcome to Wrexham scores for good sport and entertainment value. And if Brian and I didn't convince you to pick up an instrument last episode, what more do you need? This is the Palmer Files, episode 87, with Tristan, Sam, Rob, Evelien, Matt, JD, Con, and Jennifer discussing the past, the present, the future, and some favorites too from the one final question after credits of this podcast. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 87th episode are Tristan, Sam, Rob, Evelien, Matt, JD, Con, and Jennifer. What you are about to hear is One Final Question Volume 3, this time spanning episodes 51 to 75, which conveniently picks up where Volume 2 ended at 50. As with Volumes 1 and 2, you will not be hearing all 25 questions, just a select few. For some of you, you've heard all of these before because you listened to the end of every episode all the way until it is completed. For others, you may have missed one or two of these because you didn't listen to the episode or you didn't get the opportunity to listen to the end. No matter the reason, I encourage you to enjoy a trip through what is, what was, and what could be. The criteria for selection remains my whim. Some questions were just too reliant on having heard the entire episode prior to it. Those didn't make the cut. These selections should all stand on their own. You will hear guests ask me about what I would go back to in a few different ways, what happens when we die, challenging conversations, favorite novels, superpowers, the genesis of this podcast, and more. Before we get going, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you can find all contact links to each guest in the show notes, as well as links to each of the episodes these were pulled from. Don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, do you have one final question for me? All right, Tristan, do you have one final question for me?
If there was one thing that you could go back and do, one project never finished, and you could go back and capture the energy of your youth and go and do it, what would that project be?
So, man, while I'm thinking, right, I'm going to talk for a moment and say that this is so not fair. Because this is episode 51, and on episode 1, Bill asked me one final question that was about unfinished projects. And I don't know how 50 episodes later, I'm still like, I don't know. Because in episode 1, right, I said that it was finishing a novel that my buddy Jason had written. But you talked about it being my project, and I feel like there's got to be something I've started and not finished. I think, so one of the first solo episodes I did for this show was about my trip to Israel and my 4 months abroad and how that came to be and, you know, what came of it. And while I was there, I wrote a daily journal. And at one point in my youth, it might have been some point during college or maybe just after, I had said, you know, I have all of these things. I have a daily log of all 4 months, encompassed in, 2.5 composition notebooks of all this stuff. I'm going to type this up and I'm going to do commentary now, right? So like, I type up and try and make sense and make it readable of like, April 21st, 2000. I did that. I think it was 2000. We went here, here, and here, and then I fast forward, change font, change color, whatever it is. And I do like, all right, so this is what I still remember of that. This is what impact it still had on me. And maybe it's not, maybe I don't interject from myself now on every day, because I think that would get tedious, but I can recreate that journal with added content to make it valid and bring a full circle. I think if I had actually started it when I first came up with the idea, that would be something I would like to go back and do. And I feel like that idea pops into my head every so often, but I don't know how to make that. I think at one point, and this is the whole go back to your youth, I think at one point I had figured out how to make it relevant to other people. Like, Tristan, if you didn't know me, how could I sell you this book?
Yeah.
And I feel like at one point I knew that. Now I have no idea. And perhaps it's the curse of more knowledge. I've been writing for the internet. I know what kind of a writer I am. How do I make this applicable to more people that, aren't just interested in my story? I think I would have to take the time to do it, because I feel like that's the kind of a project you don't know until you do. But I don't know if I currently have the energy that I once had. And I set it up. Like, I'll be honest with you. There is a document somewhere in either Google Drive or on a disk somewhere that's probably collecting dust, where I had literally set up like a template for myself to work from, which was color coded based on like, here's the date. Here's the actual entry. And then here's the commentary or my comments on it. And like, to keep it as authentic, I wanted to keep it as authentic as possible, because I felt like people would be interested in my misspellings, as if I was being like super creative with like words and not just telling the story as it was. So like, I misspelled something, but I had a whole template laid out. I don't know where it is anymore. Maybe that as like the one big thing. Everything else is just like, a short story here or there. That's like huge though. And I'd have to retype 2.5 full pages, full journal pages of like 100. So those are, I think, 100 pages, and it was front and back. So like 300 pages or something like that. It would be a lot. I don't know if I have the energy to do that.
That's fair enough. I mean, these are things that I've realized that you don't need to do it all at once. You can do it bit by bit. And maybe that's about learning how to put things in bit by bit. Like, in saying that, I can sit and look in the blinking cursor and think, just do a bit. And it still evades me.
It evades us all.
Yeah.
Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm riffing right here. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not going to ask myself a final question. That would be cheeky. I'm also not scripting anything, because I was like, I should put something at the end, but I don't know what it's going to be. But here's what it's going to be. It's going to be a heartfelt thank you, because I do this for myself, but there's something special about sharing it with others and knowing that you're enjoying it. That's all there is. It's extra. I hit publish on blogs all the time that I know are read by some, and that's enough. And I hit publish on this podcast, and I don't know all of you that are listening, but some of you are. And I can't tell you how much it means to me that you're consuming this content I'm creating. It would mean even more if some of the silent majority that's listening would reach out, but that's not everybody's bag. I understand that. I don't reach out every time I consume a podcast. I should. We should all be in better practice. You read a book, let the author know you enjoyed it. You watched a movie, tweet the actor. You listen to a podcast, let the podcast know. Content creators don't always work in a vacuum. We often hear the negative loudly, and they're often so loud we don't hear the positive. But we can hear the positive. We do see it, and we feel it. And I just thank you. You don't have to reach out. I think you should. Not just for me, but for anybody else you're listening to. And if you've made it this far, like, super congratulations. I know I put something at the end here all the time. Not everybody still understands that. Even after I did the whole episode based on this. So, again, this was a jumble of words and emotions. It has been over 2 years now. Thank you. All right, Sam, do you have one final question for me?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite questions, and it really goes back to our reading. I love to ask people this question. If you could erase your brain of the memory of one book so that you could read it again for the first time, you got to re-experience in all of its glory one book, what would it be? And like, why? What would that experience be for you?
The Great and Secret Show by Clive Barker. And it's the reason that while I have reread some of his stuff, I reread Galilee so I could write about it. I reread Weave World and The Thief of Always, and I plan on rereading a few other things. And I read the sequel to it, Everville, for the blog, right? But The Great and Secret Show is one of those books that I would love to erase my mind and read again for the first time, for the same reason I don't know if I want to reread it, because I have such a reverence for that book, because for a fantasy book to go that heavy in philosophy without losing me, and still have the elements of like maybe magic, hyper fantasy, and realism all kind of mashed into one. It just, and maybe it was the time. Maybe it was when I mean, look, I will be the first to admit some of these things are a product of you. A book is never a one-way street. So where you are matters a great deal into where you are as far as enjoyment of that book or understanding or compassion for the characters. But I've been searching for a very long time. I think I've always been searching. And so The Great and Secret Show I read at a time when I was definitely looking for something more. And that's a book that talks about the something more. Is there something more? What is there? And the metaphysical parts of that book, I still remember, right? But I don't want to just reread them. I think I would want to, and you know, maybe I'll change my mind, because I do hold it in such high regard. Like, will it hold up after, I don't know, I read it a decade ago. Does it still mean something to me as a person who's still searching? I don't know, but that's the book that, bar none, that's the one I would want to go back and experience for the first time.
That is incredible. And
have you read that book, by the way?
I have not. It's on my list now.
Okay. Yeah, it is. So when I come to Barker through a book called Galilee, which is fantasy through and through. Okay. It's Barker fantasy, but it's fantasy. It's not horror. It's not what people immediately think of. And I go from Galilee to Weave World, which is fantasy with a bit more of the horror that you expect from the guy who did Hellraiser, but it's not Hellraiser. And then I read Damnation Game, which is a little bit more of the horror aspect. Then I ended up, I don't know how I ended up with The Great and Secret Show, right? It's just, I enjoyed reading his stuff. And I was like, well, I don't want to quite go into like the Books of Blood, which was a book I owned and was ready to read. And a roommate of mine in college took it and I never saw it again. So he either still has it or he has lost it, which is fine. I now have a hardcover version thanks to that lot. But The Great and Secret Show just ends up being one of those books like, oh, well, I've liked his other stuff. This doesn't seem like the horror, because I'm not a really big horror guy. And I just picked it up and it was just kind of like, wow. Right. And then I've also read Cold Heart Canyon, which I'm very excited to reread. It's just such a dense book, but it happened so fast. I feel like I missed pieces. The Great and Secret Show, you might read it fast, but you don't experience it fast, which might be the reason for my answer, right? Like, and it's so super contradictory. For the same author, I'm like, yeah, I want to reread Cold Heart Canyon for everything I missed, but I don't want to reread The Great and Secret Show again because, like, I don't want to know what it will change of my perception of me loving that book. Even though both of those books, for the most part, are fantasy, little metaphysical, maybe a little elements of horror in there. So for me, that's the one. But I'm going to turn it on you, of course. So what is yours?
It's a great question, and Dune is the book that sort of pops like front of mind. And it's going to be either Dune or The Great Gatsby. I have a hard time deciding between the two of them. Two very different books. But I think particularly, so I read The Great Gatsby when I lived on Long Island in a Gold Coast mansion. Actually, that was the first college that I attended, was housed in one, and it was just the perfect evocative book for the perfect evocative moment.
Sure.
I really align with sort of your feelings there of like it was the right book at the right moment for the right person, right? That's where I was. And those intense feelings of loneliness that exist in that book really at that moment of my life rang true to me, and still do, but in very different ways. So no, I'll firm up my answer. I think The Great Gatsby would be the book that I would choose not to. No, I will say I got a little bit of a taste of this experience, so I can report a little bit from the other side. I'm married to someone who is not from the U.S., and so the U.S. canon was not part of her childhood experiences. And so when we were first dating, I read The Great Gatsby with her.
Okay.
And so I got to experience a person ask all the questions about a book that I love, that I could tell you, page by page, because she didn't have any of the context that I have. And that was a really fun experience. I will say that was the best way to reread that book, was with a person who hadn't read it before.
I'm going to have to consider that. Wow. All right, Rob, do you have one final question for me?
What happens when we die?
Okay. So I haven't really been thinking about this, except that I have. So the way this works is, I feel like I tell this story all the time now, but I've been reading all of the books in my house, or I'm trying to read all the books in my house. And there are a lot of religious texts in my house, specifically Jewish texts in my house. And I have been avoiding them like the plague, because I know that when I go down that rabbit hole, I have to be in the right headspace. I can't just pick up one of those books, even if it's not like a religious text, but I have a lot of books about Judaism. Maybe not novels per se, but definitely not like the Tanakh, like here are the rules, here's the, a lot more philosophy of religion books, I guess. And so I got to be in the right headspace. And so, but I know, especially when they're written in the right way, then they talk about that. And one of the things that I know already, and this is why I bring that up, is in Judaism, we don't believe in an after. This is it. Okay. This is what you get. And whether we're right or we're wrong is immaterial. because you can ask this question to 100 people and get 100 different answers. Or if you're at the right kind of place, you might get one answer over and over and over again. But all of that is to say that I kind of, even though I'm more of a cultural Jew than anything, to me, I believe in that to an extent where this is it. This is all we get. However, I have been thinking, based on a previous episode of this podcast, about a book by Clive Barker called The Great and Secret Show, which is not only metaphysical, but it talks about what else there might be. Whether it's an afterwards or the dream world. Okay? And so, because that's been floating in my head, I've kind of been thinking about it to a certain extent. And I mean, I feel like the best we can do, not that I have to relate it to what you now do as a teacher, but the best we can do is leave behind better than we had. Right? So
I like that.
If, for example, you, in a practical sense, are a teacher and you can leave behind knowledge for those students that you touch, great. Like, even if you died tomorrow, the students that you have touched and taught to think, as opposed to just taught to answer, hopefully they will go on and make the world a better place and teach other people the same thing. And to that extent, hopefully this podcast, by sharing your story and the others, will influence people in a way, since I don't really have a career at the moment. Like, hopefully, at the very least, this will put something good out into the world. And sharing these stories and these sentiments and these rants and these arguments and discussions will make the world a better place for the people that listen to them. So, what happens when we die? I mean, it's not really in my nature to figure it out. I get this, right? I get this. This is what I have. Boy, like, let's make it work.
That's nice. I like that.
All right, Evelyn, do you have one final question for me?
Yes. Jason, what is the one conversation and topic that you find most challenging to have, but would like to have, and with who?
So the first thing that comes to mind is process conversations, because it's a lot of pausing and thinking and trying to figure out how to explain things that are basically unexplainable.
Ooh.
Because how do I write a blog post? I don't think about it. I just do. I know some of the processes that go into it, but when I sit down, it comes out of me. How do I do this show? Well, yeah, I mean, I do some prep work. I invite you on and we schedule a time, and then I explain to you what's going to happen. But after I ask you that first question, I don't know how this works.
Right.
And I think
it's organic.
And I think that process is like that for a lot of things. Like, we can distill it down in pieces, but there are always going to be pieces we can't explain, or that we have trouble putting into words. And I love process. So that would be it. Who would I talk to?
Who would be the ultimate get in terms of having a process interview
I feel,
or conversation?
So there's definitely, I probably have, as I'm stretching, I probably have like 2 or 3 people that would fill this void for me. The first would be Marin, because he's got a very unique style of interviewing on his show, and he's a comedian and writer. Yeah. So there's so many different processes to dissect and discuss that it would be fun. And the other one that really pops to mind is Douglas Copeland, who's also a writer, but who has also dabbled in some other mediums. And again, it's a process thing. I've listened to most of Marin's shows, right? And I watched his television show, and I've seen his stand-ups, and I've read. I'm halfway through reading through Doug Copeland's bibliography, basically. So I understand the consuming aspect of it, but the creation aspect of it, I'm always going to be fascinated by that. And I think I'm always going to be fascinated by it in terms of needing the conversation for the process, like talking to you right here, right now, because we have those, behind the scenes, like DVD commentaries, but they don't talk a lot about process in terms of maybe they'll be like, and so I told the actor this, that, and the other thing, but it always feels like they're skating the surface of the process instead of really talking about the iceberg underneath.
Yeah.
And so
it's always granular. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's, I find that enjoyable because first of all, it's the one thing that feels truly unique to an individual. We all have Twitters, right? We all have, a this, that, and the other thing. But your process is like your DNA.
That's true.
It might be similar, but it will not be the same. And in that regard, it's a hard thing to have because, again, I sit down and I write. Well, but how do you write? I don't know. Right. And so in order to get a little more granular and a little more concrete about it, it's a hard conversation to have because even now I'm struggling to go, I write like it comes right. I type it comes out. Like sometimes I don't get to my computer in time. So I pick up a notepad or if I'm really struggling, I pick up my phone. I'm better typing on a keyboard. I'm better writing on a piece of paper. I am least successful when getting brain to phone keyboard.
Yes. No, I have the same problem. Basically because I can't see anymore. And I also, for some reason, have fat sausage thumbs. And I'm constantly hitting the wrong keys.
I don't think it has anything to do with the size of your thumbs because my thumbs have not grown at all. And I went from being able to type to not being able to type.
Okay. So here's the pro tip that I use to get around that is voice diction. Even though it comes off like completely autocorrect screws me every single time. But it is a good shortcut when you're in a jam. Okay. But yeah, I love that. Now, has anyone asked you that question before?
No.
Okay, cool.
No, I've had a few, like if you could interview somebody or if you could write a biography about somebody, but never that. And you know what?
Good.
I feel like a process junkie. It feels like not enough people, unless people are I feel like people are only process junkies when they're getting ready to do something. Like they'll ask me or you how to do a podcast because they want to do their own, not because they're curious for how it happens.
Agreed.
I don't care. Like I will ask you for as many times as you will say yes, how you do that because I'm just interested because maybe I can take one piece of that and apply it to something else.
Right.
Like we're not doing this.
You're doing okay, Jason. Well, I don't think you need me.
All right, Matt, do you have one final question for me?
What is your favorite novel?
All right, favorite novel. Well, I feel like
we'll keep it to fiction this time.
We'll keep it to fiction. All right. So I feel like there's a part of me, because this came up in a recent episode, or a recent after question. I don't know, one of the two, which was, what book would you not want to, would you want to forget and reread again? And I said The Great and Secret Show by Clive Barker, because I'm afraid to reread it. So I'd rather forget about it altogether and reread it. But that, to me, is not a favorite novel. Because a favorite novel, to me, is something that you just read over and over and over again. And in that regard, it could be any number of things. Right now, it's going to be one of the authors that I keep going back to, right? So narrowing it down, I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do this, but Clive Barker's Galilee is an amazing love story. But it's not. So it's so much more than that. And that's one that I have read a couple times. And I love it every single time I read it. Michael Crichton, you know what? I actually think The Lost World is one of the best books ever written. It reads like a play on an island. It's nothing like the movie. And look, I still love Jurassic Park, but The Lost World is just so, I don't know, something else about it. And then, I've read all the Daytons, but I've been reading through all the Daytons, so I've never gone back. I haven't reread any of the Daytons. But Douglas Copeland, however, I think Microsurfs might be up there as well as one of those like super. I could read this book over and over again. So I gave you a bunch right there of
yes, you did.
These are a bunch that I can read over and over again. Of them right now, probably Galilee's the leader in the clubhouse. Okay. But that's also because of the ones I mentioned. It's the only one I have read multiple times. The others I want to read again and again, but who has the time to read again and again when I just told you in the episode I got a third of my house that I still need to read. So rereading these is not likely to happen anytime soon. But I have to say Galilee by Clive Barker. And it's just one of those, it's fantasy, it's romance. It's got a little bit of that like historical mystique. It does have like elements of a Harlequin romance, like small elements, but it's also supernatural and like so much more. So it crosses so many genres, which might be one of the reasons I can just keep rereading it, because it's like so much other things, and depending on your mood, you might pick up different things from it. So I guess Galilee, final answer. But in fairness, had you asked favorite book, I would probably still go with the rereading concept and still go with a novel, because I don't know, of all the things I've ever reread, I don't think I've ever reread any nonfiction. For me, I read nonfiction and I learn from it and I'm done. And I keep it on my shelf because, number one, I'm a collector, and number two, I just, maybe one day I'll want to look up that quote in that thing one time, but I'm still more likely to just flip through a piece of nonfiction that I've already read. Whereas fiction, I will eventually, if I ever finish reading all of the other books, not in the world, but just in my house, I will revisit them.
I'm smirking a little bit just because what you were saying about having that nonfiction book on your shelf, just in case you might need a quote from that someday. I can't tell you the number of interactions I have in a given week of people who are like, I read this book in 1996, and I'm hoping you still have it on your shelf. And I'm like, oh, honey, this is.
Well, I know
What book was it?
I mean, I know libraries purge, but you do hold on to some of those things, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we hold on to material as long as it still circulates. If it checks out even once in a year, it lives another day, so to speak, or it lives another year, really.
Okay.
But it is not really as much of a focus of our collection development process to have
every
material
book, written.
Pretty much. Our contemporaries in the Baltimore City system, they're much more likely to be like, yeah, sure, we'll just throw it in red dot storage. And, imagine like the end of Indiana Jones with the crates and everything else. And it's not a stretch to just imagine some poor person just wandering around there, just like, yeah, sure, we'll just throw it up on that shelf.
So it does beg the question, though. Like in the library proper, the Dewey Decimal System is like reign supreme, and we can always find books. But in red dot storage, that can't still be the case.
So it gets worse because my library system uses Dewey Decimal. Our contemporaries in Baltimore City use the Library of Congress classification system. Oh, yeah. And it gets even worse. There are some library systems that even go as far as to just ditch the numbers entirely, and they just label it based on the subject matter. So,
like a bookstore.
Yeah, so pretty much like a bookstore.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can understand how that would be good for the user, like the consumer, because, I'm used to browsing. Well, I guess, I mean, how many, like what every bookstore I'm about to announce, except for Barnes and Noble, is gone. Like, oh yeah, I'm used to looking at Borders or Walden
Borders,
or yeah. I mean, those things don't exist anymore. So like, all right, but I do understand it a little bit because that's how. All right.
But yeah, so it's fine for when you're dealing with subjects like theology, like you could say theology Christian, theology Buddhism, theology Islam, theology Judaism.
Yes.
However, both Dewey Decimal and Library of Congress classifications, and I cannot talk intelligently on cataloging in this kind of stuff because that was a class I almost did not pass in my master's in library science courses. I was not a good cataloging student.
That just doesn't seem like fun.
It's you have to have a certain mindset and an almost savant-like level of patience to figure out how to do that stuff. And I bought our team I just sent them gift cards. I'm like, thank you, because Jesus Christ, I don't want to do this. Thank you for doing this. Now, knock on wood, a lot of our publishers and suppliers just submit these Dewey Decimal records for us automatically, so we don't have to do a lot of extra stuff. We might finesse the numbers a little bit just to keep them more or less in line with our shelving, but nothing radical. So yeah, there's Dewey Decimal, there's Library of Congress. Library of Congress, I still don't understand it, but it's also the most comprehensive out of them.
Okay.
Melville Dewey, there's a motion underfoot to kind of move away from Dewey Decimal because Melville Dewey he's a bit problematic. His system would classify things like homosexuality as mental illness or
okay.
Yeah, so some of the, to the average user, no one's going to know that because those numbers have been reclaimed for another purpose. But anybody it's a very library centric problem. Be like, oh, Melville Dewey, horrible racist, homophobe, sexist pig. I mean, I'm not
laughing because of anything other than, they all were. Like the telescope named after James Webb, like he did a lot. He helped us get to the moon. Kind of a piece of shit. Like, but helped us get to the moon though. Yeah. And I understand some people don't see the balance at all. Like, oh no, but that's another time.
Right.
All right, Matt, do you have one final question for me?
The final question of the day is, do you believe in New Year's resolutions?
I don't.
And why is that?
Because I don't like waiting. Like if I want to do something, I'm going to do it, right? Like, as we record this, New Year's is a month away or a couple weeks away. So if I think of a new resolution, I have to wait another 11 months, right? Like, or whatever it is. I'm also not one on big on weekly shit either. Like if you want to start, why not now? I play musical instruments. I would very much love to give myself a schedule because I bought myself an electric drum kit. So I've been learning to play the drums again. I have a bass. I have guitars. Every once in a while I go like, I haven't picked up my bass in months. And I go, all right, well, tomorrow. And it's tomorrow, right? It's not, all right, next month I'll, bass on Mondays and drums on Tuesdays. Like, no, tomorrow. And for me, part of it's impatience, but the other part of it is if you don't start it, like with it in your head, like, why am I doing? I'm doing this because I miss playing the bass. By the time I get around to next week, next month, next year, I'll forget why I wanted to do it. It'll be like, I got this piece of paper here or this note on my phone that says play the bass, but like, I don't really feel like doing that right now. No, I felt like doing it. It's, 11 o'clock at night. I can't do it now. I'll do it tomorrow. And that's fine. Like, and I feel that I have a very horrible ability to be able to talk myself in or out of anything. So if I give myself the time and space to wait for next week, next month, next year, nothing will ever get done. Like, do it. I'm very much in a place where, like, I try to do the thing now. It's not always possible, but then next available moment, right? I turned myself into a reader by reading every night. I didn't do that as a New Year's resolution. It was just like, I've decided I want to read. Here's a book. I'm going to start reading today, right? Like, I used to make fun of people that did like the whole NaNoWriMo, the 1,000 words a day in November, because it's like, well, why don't you just do that? It's July. Like, why are you saving that idea right now? Like, you would have, even if you did every third day, by the time we got to November, you'd have a full novel written. Like, why wait? And so, it's like, I would love to tell you, like, oh, I read a book, it changed my life. No, I just got impatient. Like, I'm generally impatient anyway, but I also know that I am horrible to myself at times. So tomorrow I will hopefully work out. And if I don't, maybe the next day. It's cold. Okay. I'm in the Northeast. I don't like going out in the cold. So it's all inside stuff until it hits 70, and then I'll go for a run. But that doesn't mean I can't do something. And why wait? It really just boils down to why wait. Like, I understand New Year's resolutions work for some people. But to those people, I ask, if you fail at your resolution, do you wait until, like, if you make it till April and then give up on that diet, do you wait until January again, or do you start back up in May? Like, what are you doing? And I feel like if you do that enough, right? Like, where you just, that didn't work out, I'm going to try something new tomorrow. Then resolutions become, like, New Year's resolutions become less and less of a thing, because you're just always trying something. And whether you're failing or being successful is completely irrelevant. Like, it's time to go. Tomorrow's a new day. And it sounds like hippy dippy shit, but really, you're being lazy, in my estimation, if you wait. Like, all right, well, I didn't quit smoking this year, and it's February. So you're going to be a smoker for another 9 months? Like, what are you doing? That's not how this should work. And so, or, I gave up drinking, and I had a drink. Like, then start again tomorrow. Like, we all fail. I mean, I guess that's, but that doesn't mean we aren't all trying. Don't just let it be, right? Like, I have a few friends right now that are trying daily tasks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they're going to mess up. I'm sure they're going to miss one. I'm hopeful that they miss one and keep going, right? Like, you hit 15 in a row, you missed one, go for another 15. It's fine. We all need breaks, whatever. But, like, yeah, I'm not for a New Year's resolutions, because it's just, and to kind of piggyback on what we talked about in the episode, people try the big thing, right? I once, for an internship I did doing marketing at a hospital, wrote some papers on smoking cessation, quitting smoking. And one of the things I learned from that, and we had some alcoholism ones as well, is that the best thing you can do to stop drinking or smoking or whatever, overeating, is do less of it tomorrow, right? Don't wait until December 31st and be like, I'm quitting smoking tomorrow. No, in October, let's pretend it's October, go, you know what? I'm going to smoke less tomorrow. Or this week, I'm going to buy 1 carton instead of 2 and make it last. And then the next week you go, I'm going to buy 1 pack and make it last. And then by the time you get to that point, you go, all right, I'm going to stop now, right? Like, and we don't do a good job with, or I should say, we do such a monumental overkill on you quit smoking that we're not celebrating the people that went and are smoking less or are drinking less or are eating less. And those little victories mean a lot to those people. And when we don't celebrate them as a culture or as a friend, they're just like, well, because I didn't quit whatever it was, I'll just go back to it. Because nobody cares that I'm, not drinking as much or that I'm only, eating 1 candy bar a day instead of 5, right? Like whatever the vice is. Little things, man. Bite size. Like bite size your goals. I think that's my other problem with New Year's resolution. They're always so grandiose and they're usually not something that can be done in a day. Yeah, it frustrates me.
I can tell. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of them either. I'm more into annual goal setting and planning this is the time constraint of the year. Okay. What can I get done during this period for my business, for myself? That is more my speed than what am I going to resolve and commit to and not just cold turkey stuff and all that. So I'm with you on that.
I think the other thing that helps me here is that I'm Jewish and we have 2 New Years. And we don't talk about resolutions for the Jewish New Year. And so, if I really wanted to play that game, come the fall, I could pick a resolution. And if it fails before December 31st, I can pick it up again, right? And just have a built-in, tester. But no, why wait? I'm just too impatient. And if you have the momentum, if you have the inspiration to do the thing, or don't do the thing, depending on what it is, right? Just why wait?
Why wait?
Life's too short. Life's too short. All right, JD, do you have one final question for me?
I do. So we established that we're generally around the same age.
Yes.
And so I always like to look at those generational pieces, and especially when it comes to technology, because there are days where I just can't stand technology. Tell me what you miss the most about VHS tapes.
Blockbuster. That's it. It's going to it's the experience of going to the Blockbuster on a Friday night with a group of friends and just yelling across the Blockbuster hey, do you want to, how about this? No, we watched that last week without you. How about this? That experience. We can't agree on anything. Let's just get our old standby.
They're all out of that movie, man. That just came out yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's it, though, man. I miss that experience of arguing about it.
Because it becomes overwhelming now. It's just, I can watch anything, anytime. Great, I guess, but it's still not you don't get to miss out on it. It's not like it's gone.
No. And the other thing is I guess it's very underrated now because there's so many avenues for this, but every Blockbuster had one employee that knew movies. There were plenty that were there for the paycheck and it was a decent job. Yeah. There's always one guy there that could suggest something to you.
He had something. No, I mean, I totally hit I could see myself in that. Look, you'd walk in and like know exactly where that movie was or where the new releases are. Like you knew before you even got like 20 feet to like, damn it. There's no, it's not as thick. They're all gone. It's just the display. Damn it.
Yeah. No, I mean, the other thing is I recently within the last year, I watched the documentary, The Last Blockbuster.
The Last Blockbuster. Yeah, that was great.
And it was just, it takes you back. Like the moment that they go in there, like you smell it, like you feel the lights already. And you like it was a part of our like childhood. The other part is we thought we were so grown up.
We did.
We weren't, but we so thought we were grown up. And I will say, even like the last time I remember going to a Blockbuster, like towards the end, it wasn't the same with DVDs because there's something about the size of a VHS that like you can't.
It was like you checked out the whole store if you got like 3 movies.
Yeah, you can't just casually carry that or whatever. Like there's some heft to it. And cracking the plastic and snapping it back together. Yeah, no, that's it.
Plus, if you were out of, like, say you went in there, to get, a specific new release or whatever, and that wasn't there, but, your friends were over or whatever, like that was your movie night, with your family, like you had 2 choices. You either were like, well, guess we're not having movie night or we're going to watch something we have at home, or you were like, well, I heard this one was good, and you branched out and you found something else. Now it's like, well, you suggested this one to me, or I'm going to put all these in my watch list, and now I've got nothing but these. And they don't even suggest it anymore. Like, whatever you're talking about, Disney Plus, Apple TV, like they have their own suggestions, and it's like, wait a minute, like you have to like dig, you have to find, like, even with music, you have to like find where you can browse categories just to, venture out. Now it's like no, that was a good, I didn't even think about that one.
Well, and don't forget, they also put series right next to movies, right? So it's like, you may like this. And it's like, well, yeah, I want to watch it. I want to see the end in less than 2 hours. I don't have 6 hours for this 6-episode miniseries. Like, I just want to see something happen.
Just want to see happen.
That's it. Like, let it. Yeah, that's it. I mean, obviously I don't miss rewinding. I don't miss tracking. These are the things I do not miss, but the blockbuster, well, or the movie rental, some people had their own local ones. Cause I
that experience. Yeah, sure. But I generalize it too, but it's the same thing. You're right.
Yeah. That's it. That's what I miss.
I like it.
All right, Con, do you have one final question for me?
Yeah, I always find this interesting when I'm talking to people that, do something creative or, kind of put forward their stuff on social media, like, or, in media in general. Like, what was the genesis of this podcast? Like the format of it? Like, how did the whole thing spin out to this?
It's fairly nebulous, of like a bunch of things coalescing. And I've done the origin story before, but like, the origin story starts with the blog and me getting introduced to podcasts and kind of guesting a lot and then producing. And then I get the idea for my own show. And then I finally launch my own show. But where it is now is more nebulous of all of the episodes that have come before it. So like all those other things that I just cliff notes were important. But like I'm the creator, the sole creator behind all of this. So I've edited episodes that maybe the guest talked more than I did, which is fine. Like, not every conversation is 100% 50-50. That's true if you're sitting down to have coffee with somebody in a diner or if you're on a podcast. But I take that into consideration when I'm in it, like in the editing process of like, oh, you know what? I didn't talk enough there, or I talked too much there. And so I've kind of got a general feel for what I think I'm looking to do, but a lot of it ends up being roll with the punches because it's like everybody's different and I'm not having the same person on to talk about the same thing over and over and over again. And, I've talked to a bunch of graphic designers. Every conversation's been different, right? And I'm not trying to get the same thing. But the other piece to this is I've learned from watching others what I don't want to do. Like, I just want to have a conversation with you, man. Like, you seem like an interesting person. Let's talk. Not, you seem like an interesting person. What can I trap you into saying that will be clickbait, right? Like, I mean, I know those people. I'm never going to be one of them. I don't even know if I could do that.
Like, I need the clicks though, yo. I need the clicks.
No. Like, cause I feel like it's, I want to connect with you. Like my presumption for my own audience, what I know of it is that when I connect with you or if I'm just so enraptured in your story, if I'm just listening and asking questions to move it along, like, they're happy with that. My audience doesn't need me to attack you, and they're not looking for me to trap you. And I think that's an evolution of having done it, right? Like, that's not a thing where, yeah, I think I'll have a podcast. What will it be? I'll talk to people. Cool. But like, you have to do it so many times and so often and listen to yourself and then see what happens. Like, I'm like, I love this format. I don't think enough people talk in long form conversation. And I talk to a lot of people where they're on a show that's like a 20-minute podcast. And they're like, it was just starting to get good. And they said, thanks for coming. You know, I get long-winded. Maybe my guests get long-winded at times. That's going to happen. But I never want it to be like, oh, that was really interesting. No time for a follow-up, though. Thanks for listening. No, it's not good.
I know exactly what you mean. I've hosted I've co-hosted a couple podcasts, and it's an interesting balancing act. I had to ask. It's always people's intention for starting a podcast is always different. Especially when it's not based around any particular kind of content.
No.
Like the ones I was on, yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I am very aware that I don't follow my own advice, right? Like, you want to start a podcast? Pick a topic. Like, it's better. You'll have a built-in audience, right? Mm-hmm. However, I started the podcast after blogging for 8 years. And the benefit of that was that in 8 years of blogging about anything, okay, because I have a geek blog, generally speaking, but you can be a sports geek and a music geek and a book geek and a movie geek. I can write about anything I want. And that's one of the reasons that the blog is now 10 years old, because I haven't gotten sick of it. I think if it would have been like a Thundercats blog, I'm going to run out of episodes. Like, I might get sick of it, like being in it every day. No, I can write about anything and everything. And 8 years of that was like, all right, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm just going to talk to people. Who are you going to talk to? Anyone. Everybody's got a story. And so I feel like the benefit of it is that I'm, you and I can have you back on in 2 years, in a year, in 5 years. We'll have a different story. You'll be in a different place. I'll be in a different place. We'll have different conversation, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, I won't be sick of this show because I'm going to talk to whoever and whatever.
That's where I identify with you at a lot. It's like, oh, we could do a topic. And that's how I kind of like with my business. I could just do emotes all the time for Twitch, but I would get sick of it, and it would drive me insane. That's kind of the reason why I do so many different things. If I didn't, it would be too taxing mentally. Like, it would be so dry mentally to do the exact same thing all the time that you would get burnt out. Yeah. So you have to talk about something else, or you have to make something else, or do something else and stretch those muscles, or you atrophy mentally and creatively.
Yeah, I get enough exercise from like helping people with their other things, and I think a lot of creatives are surrounded by creatives. We kind of congregate around each other. We find each other like gravity. Like, yeah, I got to pull to that guy, and I don't know why. Oh, years later, like, oh, he's making a movie, and I'm going to help him produce it, right? Like, we find each other, and I get enough of that, of like other mediums elsewhere, that I can continue to write once a week and put out this podcast every 2, right? Like, but I think it's one of the reasons that I connect with you, because like, you are doing all the things. Like, I had an idea, and it's not just on an idea board. It's like, no, I'm going to do that. Like, let's go.
Always make the thing.
Jennifer, do you have one final question for me?
Absolutely. So this is a question that I ask pretty much everybody that I have coffee with. And it's probably the last question I ask them as well. I ask them, what's your superpower? Not if you could have any superpower. Not like, if I could have it. No, but what is your superpower?
My superpower. I feel like it is. It's a combination. It's whatever happens when you put persistence and perseverance into a hadron collider. I don't know what that ends up being, because if I'm on your side, you're stuck with me. Like, I've got a friend who is working on a movie, and now I'm his producer, because like we would talk about it and I would help him. I was like, I want to help you. That's it, period. I want to help you. And now I'm helping him on a much more regular basis, as opposed to just being on the phone when he's complaining about this project. Now I'm in there with him, right? I got a friend whose book of poetry I edited, and he's working on his second one. And he's stuck with me as an editor until he fires me, which is not possible because we've known each other for like 3-4 decades, right? So like, if I'm on your side, you're stuck with me, and I'm going to push you, right? And I think that's my superpower. It's not. I mean, it's really good for other people. I don't know. Not so good. I mean, I don't push myself as hard as I push others.
I think that's what superpowers are. I think they are better for other people than they are for you.
I mean, okay. Then that's definitely my superpower. And that, and the ability to piss both of those friends and other friends off by being 5 steps ahead, right? Like, one of the things that I can do really well is see the details and the big picture at the same time. And I can connect the dots a little bit. So like, one of my former bosses, who was one of my favorite bosses of all time, would get very upset because I would be like, yeah, we're going to change this little detail and it's not going to work in 5 years. What? Like, that's a jump? Like, I know that's a statement I've made to her, right? And I know the look I got from her when I said it, right? Because no one talks like that. And, maybe the two things were slightly related or unrelated, or maybe it's because we're doing this thing and it won't work in 5 years. But yeah, let's make it pretty now. Maybe whatever it was. But I can do the details and the big picture. And a lot of the times I can see how they connect. And people don't like that, by the way. I will say that. Like, I as a secondary superpower, I can absorb other people's like dislike, because, I may not remember all the details of things, and I may not be able to completely coherently put things together, but I'm right often enough that I'm like, that won't work in 5 years, and you will ask me how, and I'll have no real, like, it just won't. Like, you'll have to trust me. I can't always connect the dots between looking at the details and seeing the big picture. You're just going to have to trust me.
My brother-in-law, he has this like great superpower and this talent where he can take 2 words that don't relate to one another or like in some sort of context, and he puts them together to make something new. And it's always made my kids laugh. They always thought like this was the best thing about their Uncle Mike, was like he could make these new words out of words that already existed. Like, mind blown, right?
Yeah.
Maybe this is your word. Like, maybe you have like firstance.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to workshop that one.
Yeah.
But I guess that's my thing.
I think that's a fantastic superpower.
Thus completes One Final Question, Volume 3. And while I've obviously only done this 3 times, I have to say it's great to revisit these things from time to time. Not just because as creators we are often on to the next thing, but because as humans, it's good to look back. I don't know what to make of looking back. I just know it's important to know where we have been. Our personal journeys, our professional journeys, life is always ongoing, and looking forward is important, but so is looking backwards. Look at what you did. Look at what you survived. Look at what you overcame. Look at what you created. Look at what you accomplished. In a world full of chaos and negativity, you have endured, and that is something. So thank you for enduring, and thank you for listening to episode 87 of the Palmer Files. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact myself and my guests, Tristan, Sam, Rob, Evelien, Matt, JD, Con, and Jennifer, in the show notes. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. Here we are again. Another one final question is done. And I have to put something here as an after credits because I don't know. I like the idea that there's always something back here, but there was no guest. There were guests on this episode, and this is a compilation episode. So all that's left is, like the last time, for me to ramble with no preamble, I guess. No, as many of you know, I draft out my intros and my outros and my cold opens. This I never draft. This is always off the cuff. And I always end up in the same vein of going, thank you for listening. Thanks for being here. Thanks for checking me out. If this is your first time, what a first time. If this is your 87th time, then thank you. You've been with me since the beginning. And if this is your any time in between, thanks for coming back. Things are going to continue. Episode 88's been recorded. Episode 89's been recorded. Episode 90's been recorded. And I have thoughts on 90 through at least 96. And I know who's coming on for 100. So this isn't the end. I don't know when that would be, but I don't intend to end at 100. I barely even tend to take a break at 100. I think we'll just go right on through to 101, 102, and on to infinity and beyond, I guess. I don't know. Probably not infinity. I'm not going to live forever. But thank you for listening to the ramblings of this guy. Yep, that's all I got.